Many times we don't understand the law. Law for the People with Eric Cedillo is here to inform, educate, and answer your legal questions. Thank you for tuning in today. From the law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas, Texas, here's your host, Eric Cedillo.
We've got an incredible guest this afternoon that I'm going to introduce shortly. I just want to kind of reiterate, as we always do, that if you're listening in, most of the stuff we talk about from a legal perspective is usually applying Texas law, perhaps federal law. If you're listening in from another country, that might be a little bit different for you. So we'll try to qualify that, but just kind of take that into consideration throughout the program. My first guest today, I'm really excited about talking to and finding out who she is and what she's all about. Miss Sasha Moreno. She's going to tell you a little bit about herself in a few minutes, but she is running for Justice of the Peace, I believe, Precinct 4.
Yes, Place 2.
And that's a position that for some of you just kind of listening in for the first time, we're going to find out what a JP does and what they're kind of responsible for and why you're running. But before we do that, let's just talk about you a little bit, Sasha. Why don't you introduce yourself and just kind of tell us what you're currently up to.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I'm excited to speak with you and talk to your listeners and give you a little bit about my background. But I am currently an immigration attorney, and so I've been doing that for the past year. I've practiced foreclosure defense as well as been in-house at a movie studio actually in California.
Okay.
But immigration is a really big passion of mine because it's a very personal story. My dad, my grandparents are all immigrants from Mexico.
Right.
And so this past year has been has its ups and downs because of the current administration, but it's been very rewarding and every day is a new fight. But I think that is part of what led me to decide to run for office because I see a lot of times our clients who unfortunately were not properly advised of their legal rights at another court. And so they think, it's a small criminal misdemeanor, it's not going to be a big deal. And unfortunately, that now makes them deportable because they decided to maybe not fight, or they just took the guilty plea because they were scared and wanted just to get out of the courtroom or get out of jail as soon as possible, not knowing that even if it was such a small crime now that will put them in immigration proceedings, and now they could be deported from the country.
And that's really important. I think lots of people don't always understand that the system is kind of geared towards funneling people through as quickly as possible. And when you have that, if you have a judge who wants to expedite that docket and make things happen real quickly, they may not jump through the same hoops of cautioning, perhaps certainly telling perhaps someone who isn't could lose some real possibly or potentially become deportable, advise them accordingly. All those things kind of come into play, and people have to realize the ramifications of what's happening. So let's talk about the position that you're running for, first of all, and then kind of give people a sense of what that is, and then let's talk about you and where you're coming from. But before we do that, Justice of the Peace, what do they do generally, and what do they do here in of course, the state of Texas and here in Dallas County?
So most people, I think, when they think of Justice of the Peace, automatically think of Judge Judy, which per se, if you've ever seen the show, she does preside
Love Judge
over.
Judy.
Yes, it's great entertainment. But she presides over small claims courts. So small claims or any civil claims under $10,000. And so that is a good chunk of what the JP docket does oversee and preside over. So it's civil. There's also evictions. There is an evictions docket, which is unfortunately there is a ton of cases in Dallas County right now of people getting evicted because of this housing issues that we're seeing across the different cities, especially in Dallas. They also do have jurisdiction over Class C misdemeanors. Occupational licenses is also something that JPs do preside over. So if your license has been suspended for any other reason, you can apply for a license to show that you need it in order to travel to and from work. And the other thing that most people think of JPs is getting married. So JPs can marry people and provide over ceremonies. And so I think those would be the main issues that the JPs do oversee. Before in the past, they've also presided over truancy cases. Right now in Dallas County, it seems like they're trying to take away some of that responsibility and just have sole truancy court judges.
Right.
But JPs do have jurisdiction over truancy, and I actually think it's beneficial because it's from a cost perspective, it's actually beneficial to save money for the JPs to preside over those cases. I believe only 1 or 2 JPs do that currently.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see that change because I do think there's also some great policy issues that we could work on because those are our kids who we're trying to understand why are they being truant in the first place and
exactly.
trying to make sure that this is not just the beginning of their, I guess, foray into the justice system.
Yeah.
We want to try to keep them out.
A big part of what I do at the clinics has in the past been helping people with landlord-tenant issues. Certainly, feds or forcible entry and detainers, a big part of that. A big part of JP dockets, as you mentioned, are evictions. People getting evicted for a variety of reasons. And lots of times we see people going in and just, I don't know where this came from. This landlord sent me this, and I'm showing up and I don't know what to do. The big part that we preach, I think, to our students as they're representing these individuals is that procedurally there's a lot of things that a judge can do to kind of stop the other side when they're not doing what they should be doing properly. I'll be real honest with you. We've had a couple of cases where you could just really see that the judge was beholden to the apartment complex owner in a lot of ways. We've had a lot of course, we spend a lot of time researching and offering up defenses and other things, and they're just kind of pushed aside because the relationship that a lot of these players have. Unfortunately, you have an attorney who's representing a number of apartment complexes, is going to be in that court probably, every day. Big supporter, I'm assuming, of the JP in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say anybody in particular, but it does happen.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And when people don't always have, in law school, we preach ethics and we talk about doing what's right by our clients. When someone isn't an attorney, they don't have that perspective. They don't have that background in a lot of ways. So for me, I think, personally, I think it's really important that you be a lawyer because you've had the opportunity to have that training and the other things that kind of come with it. But in JP court, you don't have to be an attorney. Is that right?
That is correct. So this is the only judicial position that does not require a law degree, and that is by the state legislature would have to change the laws in order to make that a mandatory requirement. And so we do see lots of JPs who do not have any legal experience before. Again, they don't need a law degree. But I think what you're saying is correct. You need to have that knowledge because more often than not, people who go into the JP courts are appearing pro se, meaning they're representing themselves. So they don't have an attorney. So if the judge on the bench doesn't really have that legal background, how are they going to try to explain to someone? They're basically kind of on the same ground per se, that they don't have that background to understand what their rights are, what this correct statutes that even the landlords need to be following. And that's something too, 'cause my first job out of law school was foreclosure defense. So I would represent homeowners. We would sue banks because obviously the homeowner stopped paying their mortgage for whatever reason. Well, they've broken that contract. Well, at the same time too, though, the banks were foreclosing without following the proper foreclosure statutes. So they also need to comply. And so that was part of our defense. Because if you're expecting them to comply with the law or their contract, we should expect the same of the banks. And a lot of times too, it was just to kind of give homeowners the opportunity to look for just the next place that they're going to live, and it got them time. While the banks had to properly, get their paperwork aligned, gave them maybe 1-2 months, so that way they can know maybe they can find an apartment, they can find someone to live with, and so that's one thing that I think is important, and that's a big part of our campaign. Is as an attorney, we took an oath saying that we need to uphold the laws of our country. And I expect to do that, and I will do that. But at the same time, we shouldn't, the justice system shouldn't be used against our community, especially the community who just doesn't understand the system or don't know their rights. And so I think we need to work hand in hand in making sure that everyone is getting a fair opportunity to present their case and to receive a fair outcome.
Before we get into your background,
Mm-hmm.
into who you are and what you're all about, JP's, any idea what the kind of the docket looks like in terms of numbers? How many cases do JP's or this particular place and precinct kind of have, if you have any idea?
Just from what I've seen in terms of statistics, I mean, they're talking potentially, what I've seen on all the court websites that I've looked at, potentially like 10,000 cases.
Wow.
In a year.
Wow, 10,000 cases in a year.
Mm-hmm.
So the judge, the JP, would certainly affect the lives of a whole lot of people in a whole lot of ways, just depending on what the cases are. I would imagine that's a lot larger caseload than our county courts or district courts per, the numbers that they represent.
Oh, I definitely would agree with that, and I think that's another thing, and we can talk about that later. But there's some other policies that I would like to implement to, I think, help ease the burden on the docket that I think could benefit not just the court system, but also our community members. Again, I think the goal is, I don't think a judge should expect, I can't wait to have more people in my docket. That should never be the goal, because that means something bad has happened. Either a law's been broken, someone's been harmed. So how can we stop people from coming into the courtroom, lessen the load, not just on us, but also in the community?
Absolutely. Definitely going to get into that in the second part of our segment. But let's talk about you. Let's talk about where you're from. Where were you originally born?
So I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. Okay. So the border city out, the opposite west side of Texas. Yeah. It's the only city that's in a different time zone.
Yeah, in Texas, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But I went to high school there. So again, I think immigration, that's why it became such a passion for me. I lived on the border. Yeah. I grew up on the border. We would go to Mexico all the time because that's where our family was from, even just for dinner, to go to the market. Yeah. Obviously, times have changed now. Fortunately, the immigration policies too have deterred people, and so that's. I love that living and growing up in El Paso, though, because I got to see. I was proud to, I am proud to be American, and I get to see all the rights and great things about being American. But at the same time, I was lucky enough that if we wanted to go to Mexico for the day or to go visit family, we were able to do that within 20 minutes. We could just go across the border. Yeah.
Your parents from El Paso, from someplace else?
So my mom was born in El Paso. My dad is from Chihuahua, Mexico, which is the northern state of Mexico, and so were my grandparents. And so they all came to the U.S. in the 1950s. Okay. But they went through the process of becoming residents and citizens. And so it's kind of nice. As I've gotten older and now I'm in my profession, is just asking their stories, because now I see when I have my clients and I go represent them in court or for citizenship interviews, I think, oh, my dad or my grandpa or grandma were doing the same thing.
All right. You know where they met, your folks?
Yes, they met dancing.
Where at?
In El Paso.
In El Paso?
Yes.
Oh, very cool.
So my dad was already a citizen at the time.
Yeah. What do they do for a living?
So my dad currently does insurance. For the long time, because the majority of the family came from Mexico, they did manufacturing. And so they worked we had a legacy of Levi Strauss. Okay. And so they worked their way up from, machine workers and all that eventually into management, because I would say 3 members of the family worked for Levi for over 40 years.
Oh, really?
But when they started moving all the manufacturing to different countries, and my dad actually did work in Mexico, and he also worked in Central America for several years. Okay. And would just travel back and forth. But once that happened and they started going overseas to Asia, he decided he wanted to change. And so now he does insurance. And my mom works in the schools. Okay. She's actually retired, but she still works as a speech language pathologist.
Oh, really?
So she helps mostly younger students, I would say middle school and high school now, with any of their speech impediments, or if, a lot of her students may have disabilities, and so helping them, whether it's enunciate or even learn to talk and things like that.
Okay. And brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have 2 brothers and 1 sister, and I currently actually live with my brother and sister now, and so that was another reason why I decided to run for office in the Irving area, because we're slowly making our way out here. Okay. And so it's been great to now start to build our family base out here in the DFW area.
Yeah. You mentioned you went to high school in El Paso. What happened after that?
So after high school, I actually went to the University of North Texas here in Denton.
Okay.
And the funny story is I actually started off as a dance major. I wanted to be.
Why is that funny?
Because most people
laughs over in the corner.
Yes, because most people, if you know me, they're like, that's not your personality. You're this attorney, and now you're running for office. But back in high school, the arts were something that was very important to me, and it still is important to me. I'm just too old and not in shape to be doing that anymore professionally. And
no Dancing with the Stars in your future.
Well, I mean, if they
you
call,
never know,
you never know. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed.
Yeah.
So I started off as a dance major, and then, you get the spiel from even my parents were like, what's your career going to be and how are you going to make money? So I ended up actually changing to journalism.
Okay.
Because I thought I wanted to be a reporter or a news anchor. And so I worked at the TV station on campus, NTTV, North Texas Television, and spent a bunch of time doing reports and doing the news. We do have a live news station, a news segment every day from Monday through Thursday at 6 o'clock, where we would do an actual newscast, and it would get broadcast all the way from Denton, I believe, up to Flower Mound.
Yeah.
But as you know, as we are seeing, especially this year, the news and media reports a lot on politics and policy. And so I got accepted into this internship with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute in 2007. And part of the reason I decided to apply, because I thought, this will be a great opportunity because I'm going to learn about policy, and this is what I'm reporting on. And that was the summer of 2007, and you get the opportunity to work on Capitol Hill, and I got to work with my congressman at the time, Congressman Reyes, from El Paso. And it was a great experience, and I did mostly policy work, and I did some of their communications in the office. But it was that summer that they had another big immigration bill go through. Then fortunately that was killed. We're still waiting for a bill. 10 years, here we are, well, now almost 11 years later, still waiting for some sort of reform. But I just remember sitting in the gallery, the House of Representatives when it was killed, and just being so upset because there was about 30 students from all over the United States that was a part of this internship, and I had several friends who were our dreamers, who were just, what am I going to do? What's going on? And so I just saw how it affected them, and I just decided then and there, instead of reporting on policy and the law, I wanted to get into the law.
That's wonderful.
And so I decided to go to law school. So I changed my perception, and I added political science as an extra major when I got back, and I went to law school, and I went to Pepperdine right after graduation in 2008. And I went to Malibu, and because I wanted to kind of get that out-of-state experience, just see what was out there.
Yeah,
and
wonderful school.
Yeah, it's a wonderful school. It's a great experience. But the other thing too that I think has been interesting is it was great for many reasons, but from that personal, like, fighting for our community. Because Pepperdine's a great school, but I was maybe one of 10 minority students.
Wow.
And I was also I never thought grew up poor. I thought we were always, but when you're going to law school with everyone who has a Mercedes-Benz and, all these nice fancy cars, you just kind of puts things in perspective.
Right.
And so I learned really quickly in law school, it just kind of really grounded me even more so about who I was representing or who I wanted to represent.
Yeah. And you came to immigration, I think, you mentioned something else. You started somewhere else, something else.
Yeah, so right out of law school, I was kind of coming out of when we were still in the really bad recession.
Yeah.
And so foreclosures were really up. And so it was not something that I had thought about, but I just saw that there were so many people getting affected. And so I did that for about a year and a half. Things started to die down, and unfortunately those type of lawsuits were not going. We tried in state and federal courts. Yeah. Because we also try to do mortgage securitization and the whole banking crisis and what was going on with mortgage-backed securities, which even for attorneys and judges, it was just really over most people's heads because we had no idea what was going on and how we were trying to argue in court.
I remember the recession well with respect to the law students and trying to find jobs. Our top law students graduating from school were having difficulty finding work. It just really affected everyone for a relatively long period of time. Okay, so you graduate. The first time you think about law school is when you're there. You hadn't thought about it before in the Hispanic Caucus. Had you thought about law school before, or was that just like a aha moment?
No, that was really an aha moment for me. Because like I said, I really thought I was going to just report on the news. And in fact, it was my journalism professor who was like, yeah, I'll write your letter recommendation for this internship. It'll be great. So maybe you can be a political correspondent. And so that's what I thought I was going to do. And it really just changed my opinion.
Sasha, I met you, I think, when you were with the LCLD, with the Latino Center for Leadership Development. Tell us a little bit about that, how that's kind of helped you or kind of prepared you for what it is you're doing now, and some of the other organizations you may be involved with.
Yeah, so the Latino Center for Leadership Development, I was fortunate enough to be a part of last year's academy class. And so for those, I'm not sure if you've talked about a little bit before about LCLD, to your audience, but it's a great organization, and there's different facets to the organization, but the academy is specifically geared towards people in our community, young leaders who are thinking about running for office. Right. And so it has 4 seminars, 4 weekends every quarter, where you get the tools and resources of this is what it would take to run a campaign. And so I think even in 2007, when I realized I wanted to go to law school, I thought maybe I could potentially run for office one day. Maybe I could be one of these policymakers. But I thought law school was the best way for me to take that first step. And so I've always had that inkling in the back of my head. And then I think with everything that's been going on at a national level, that was part of the reason why I decided, okay, I need to get the information and tools, because if I am serious about running, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so it was a great program. We had some great speakers who gave their own personal experiences, but even just, you see like campaigns and you see all the nice stuff, all the marketing and all the good stuff, but all the behind the scenes work is exhausting, and there's so many little details that you just have no idea about. So it was just a great experience for me to just get the knowledge of what potentially I was going into. And I think it was just great timing that it was happening as I was personally doing some self-reflection of maybe now is my time to get into it. And so I would say probably in the middle of the program, so the middle of, well, not last year because I've been now running for 6 months. So I would say probably like a year and a half ago that I was like, I think I'm ready to run now, and I feel that I'm getting ready. And so that's why I decided to run in this upcoming, now I'm currently running in this election. Yeah.
We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about how you plan on running and some of the differences that you might be able to bring to the bench. But before we do that, some of the other things. I know you've been on the Dallas Mayor's Star Council.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. You've got a whole litany of things that you've been a part of, which is just wonderful, I think, prep for the things that you're currently wanting to do and running. And tell us a little bit about that and maybe some of the other organizations that you're involved in.
Yes, so the Dallas Mayor's Star Council is also an organization geared towards young leaders. It's part of the mayor's office, the city of Dallas, more so to bring in young leaders of different backgrounds and to just show them about the different policy issues going on in the city. And so every month there was a different topic. One month it could be about affordable housing. Second, it could be about the school districts and education. The next month they was talking about poverty. So it was a great overall synopsis of like, here are the different things that are going on in the city. These are different ways you can help. So that was great for me to understand, even understanding the different neighborhoods, and especially with my precinct, which is so big, to understand issues that are, affecting South Dallas may not be the same issues that are affecting North Dallas, and how can we work together to try to find solutions to these issues. And so it was a great organization. I was actually just at an event yesterday with our alumni, because now there's 3 alumni who are running for office because we felt so strongly about serving our community. I'm still very involved with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. I am the Dallas chapter president, and we spend a lot of our time focusing on getting Latino students to DC to have that same experience, because this experience when I was an intern, and it's still going on, there's internships, fellowships, scholarships, even high school students can go to DC for free, all expenses paid, and you just never know who's, those 2 weeks or those 3 months, whatever program you're in, it could also change their life.
How long were you there?
I was there for almost 3 months.
3 months? Okay. That's a wonderful opportunity to learn a whole lot about how that all works.
Oh, definitely. I mean, some people may change their mind like I did, completely change their career. Some people, and you don't have to just be interested in law and politics. Like I said, I went in thinking that was journalism. There's also fellowships for people who are interested in STEM fields, so science, technology, any of those, because there's, people don't realize the spectrum of the government. So maybe if you're interested in international policy, you can get with the Department of State. If you're interested in transportation issues, I mean, there's so many opportunities in Washington, D.C. And so it just kind of opens your eyes. And especially for minority students, I think that's great to give them the opportunity to see what's out there and the possibilities.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. Before we do, just imagine that, Fern, someone who's actually prepared to run for office and done the things that homework-wise that she needs to do to kind of do that. But we'll be back with Sasha Moreno, and she's going to talk to us a little bit more about the actual position that she's running for. So you guys come back in about 2 minutes, and don't go anywhere. Law for the People with your host, me, Eric Cedillo.
Many times we don't understand the law. Law for the People with Eric Cedillo is here to inform, educate, and answer your legal questions. Thank you for tuning in today. From the law offices of Eric Cedillo, located at 1725 Greenville Avenue in Dallas, Texas, here's your host, Eric Cedillo.
Thank you so much for returning to us here on Law for the People with your host, me, Eric Cedillo. Once again, we come to you every Friday from 1 to 3. Me and Fern, and then just a whole host of special guests. One in which we have in front of us right now is Sasha Moreno, who's running for JP, and she kind of had an opportunity to explain what a JP kind of does. And now we're going to kind of get the nuance of what she'll bring to this particular bench. So, Sasha, I think we were mentioning earlier a couple of platforms that you plan on implementing when you take the bench. Fingers crossed. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the things that you might do differently once you do, in fact, win that bench.
Yeah, so there's a couple of policy or even administrative changes that I think will be a great benefit to our community that we're currently not seeing. And, I've been block walking since September, and I've been trying to talk to voters. And it seems like these policies could really help them, or that this is something that they're looking for. And so first, one being is providing the legal tools and resources in different mediums and in many languages, so that way that the community is informed of what happens when you go to a courtroom or what their rights are. I guess we talked about earlier, so more often than not, if they're appearing pro se by themselves without an attorney, they don't understand the legal jargon or what it means or the repercussions or consequences of those legal decisions. And so because, and I don't think we mentioned this before, so Precinct 4 includes Irving, Grand Prairie, Duncanville, DeSoto, Cedar Hill, Glen Heights, and Ovilla.
Okay.
So it's the southwestern portion of Dallas County. And so, Irving and Grand Prairie have really a very unique mix of backgrounds and cultures. And so that's why I think it's important that we have all these tools and resources in the different languages. It's not just Spanish, even though we do have a very big Latino population. But, we have a very big Muslim population, Indian, Pakistani. I mean, there's so many different communities in those areas who also are, unfortunately, just don't have those resources or understand their rights. So that's one. And I think that's also, for the medium's perspective, is because now we also are talking about different generations and ages. Millennials are more used to, hey, I'm going to get on YouTube and, Courtroom 101. So if you're in a truancy case and you're, a high school student, you may be more prone to go to YouTube to figure out what's going to happen, versus maybe someone who's a little bit more senior who would prefer a traditional, guide, that they, a brochure that they can take home with them,
or perhaps like a VHS, something that I would like to play on my VCR.
So we want to make sure that we provide those resources in every medium, because every person also too, for people who are better for live learners, I think even having a monthly class, Courtroom 101, once a month can be helpful, just so if they prefer they're more active learner by actually participating in a classroom. I think that's important, and I think that's a very easy fix just to help at least level the playing ground for people who go into the JP courts. Second, night court. I think, unfortunately, our community members, the courtrooms just are not accessible to them, and so if you're working 8 to 5, you're working hourly, it may be difficult to get the time off to go try to take care of your ticket or your small claims. And, unfortunately, because we do have big dockets, you could be there for several hours. Yeah. And so, a couple of hours from work, that can mean, putting food on the table, trying to make rent. If you have to work overtime to try to make up for it, or, your boss may not even give you the time off. And so if you don't show up to court, there's legal consequences. As you know, you can get a default judgment, be found guilty, there's a whole plethora of issues that come. And so I think offering our community members at least the option of night court is a great way for them to at least, again, try to tackle some of these legal issues without it becoming a burden.
I think that's amazing. I know I've heard a lot of folks talk about that and talk about the potential for doing a night court, but the fact that you're seriously considering implementing something, that's a wonderful opportunity. Some people realize that you're kind of protected when you go have to be a juror on a case, but certainly not if you were a plaintiff or defendant. So those things really kind of come into play, just things you don't always think about. We do it with the schools. Sometimes parents need to meet with the teachers and other things, and we have the ability to do that in the evenings. I think that's a wonderful thing to kind of implement. What would that kind of look like? Would that be something that I would imagine you'd be sitting on the bench during the evenings or nights to kind of handle that? Would that be like a once a week thing?
And so, I don't know all the intricacies, because eventually the county commissioner's court will have to sign off. But from a budget perspective, whether it's, typically it's 8 to 5, maybe on Thursdays we open from 12 to 8.
Okay.
And yes, I would sit up. I guess maybe that's the other thing too. That's a good thing about having a legal background. Attorneys were used to working tons of hours.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so, for me, that's not a big issue to open late, because again, I think that just offers our community members a chance to take care of these issues when they can't. Because even I currently, in my practice, I have court too, and there's days when I get scheduled and I'm like, wait, we have to move everything around because I know I have to go, and I could be there for 5 hours. And I can't even do doctor's appointments sometimes because you're just set to your court schedule. And so I think it just gives a little bit more accessibility to our community members.
Oh, that's great. Okay, and third, you mentioned the two.
Yes, and so third, I would like to, for some of these issues that we talked about, like for instance evictions, again, I don't think a good judge will just be like, okay, here you go, here's your eviction notice, here's your writ, and call it a day. I think we should be trying to actively find solutions to these problems, because not only will it help lessen the burden on the docket, but you're also helping the community. And so if I see, hey, maybe there's this issue I'm seeing from Irving residents about, maybe it's a certain ordinance, or maybe they don't have rent control, let's bring city officials, let's bring in affordable housing experts, to kind of come to the table, hold town halls, so maybe we could try to figure out how can we stop evictions from happening in the first place. Because like I said, I think that's a twofold. It benefits the court dockets and becoming more efficient, hopefully lessen the burden. But at the same time, we're finding solutions. People are not getting evicted.
Right. The first one I kind of wanted to go back to, some of the legal tools and resources. What does that look like? What does that look like for people kind of coming in? Because I know it can be incredibly overwhelming for individuals to kind of be, you receive notification, let's say a notice to vacate, and they're thinking, I have to be out of here in 3 days. Well, maybe not. You've got a court date that allows you to do something, but it's difficult for a judge, especially, to kind of educate someone, even though they're pro se. It's a difficulty, so they have to utilize the court itself, or utilize the people that work with them to provide that information. But what are those things? What do they specifically look like? Let's say on an eviction list, you've got someone who shows up and they're, as you mentioned, pro se. How do they kind of handle that? How does the court kind of assist them, and still maintain that ability to be a third party?
Well, and so I think I think the other thing is building trust in the community. That's something that I think is important. So if you get a writ and you say, for any information, please call so-and-so, you can call the courtroom and say, I don't know what this means.
Right.
Then, if we're prepared, like, hey, we have a guide, come down. Or, if you can't go, here's a video and this will tell you what's going to happen in the courtroom.
Okay.
And again, people still may be intimidated or not understand, but that's why I think it's important that we have people with legal experience on the bench, because you can ask questions. For instance, if someone comes in and I'm like, well, I don't know what this means. I'm like, okay, well, do you understand by getting evicted, XYZ, and these are the consequences, or these are your options.
Yeah.
And sometimes, maybe it will take a little bit longer, but I think, again, they need to kind of be walked through what their rights are and what the process is. And I think that's what benefit is, and I think it's important to take that time.
Yeah.
Maybe people will think that's making the courtroom less efficient, but I think if the community member at least can now make a better decision based on the knowledge that they have.
I know we had talked before, and kind of thought I had your background and your history down a little bit, but I didn't know that you have your master's in ADR.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, what that means, and how that might kind of come into play with you being on the bench.
Yeah, so I did my joint JD and Master's of Dispute Resolution at Pepperdine because I think there's also this misconception that more often than not lawsuits are going to go to trial. And more often than not, they don't. They will probably settle or something will happen before there's a deal. And again, because from most courtrooms, I see that a lot of times we're getting backed up. Even my cases right now, I'm getting backed up to 2021 before you get your final hearing.
Right.
And so if there's ways to try to settle out of court or find other ways to resolve issues. And so I saw that in a lot of my externships in law school, which is why I decided. And for those who don't know, alternative dispute resolution includes potentially negotiation, mediation, arbitration. I would say those are probably the main other ways to resolve legal disputes without actually having to go to trial.
Yeah.
And so one of the great things I loved about the program, and something that I would actually like to implement as well in the JP courts, is a master's student, we were required as part of our degree to participate in a mediation clinic. And so we as master students would go to small claims court and help resolve some of these legal issues before it went into the front of the judge, which helped lessen the burden on the judge. And it also gave a better resolution for a lot of these legal issues, because most people don't know, it's small claims, it's less than 10. People will fight over $200.
Yeah.
You would be surprised. Judge Judy, you sometimes think it's a little crazy, but people will fight for...
Those are real cases.
Yeah, those are real cases that people are upset about.
Yeah.
And, if you get a judgment, it can hurt your credit for 7 years, which can hurt, whether you can get a new apartment, if you're a renter, things like that, which then goes to evictions, and it kind of is all cyclical. And so we would literally be standing in the halls or, trying to go to a side room to say, okay, why do you feel like why you're going after him for $200? Well, would you be okay if you left with $150 cash in hand right now? We have a settlement agreement, and that's a legal binding document. And so if we get both parties to settle, there's no judgment against the party. It's a legal binding document. The judge every time would just be like, okay, you have a settlement agreement, I'll write it off. And, for instance, if something falls through, you now have another legal document that you both signed to, which you can always hope. The hope is you don't have to then go back to court to try to implement it, but it does give protections for both parties. And like I said, it helped lessen the load. And from a budget perspective, I know SMU has a really great ADR program, and I would love to try to talk to some of the other schools in the area, because students were getting practical experience, so you weren't paying them. It's part of their curriculum. They were learning how to become a mediator, and again, it helped the docket.
Yeah. There is no doubt. I think those are wonderful ideas and things that I think come from your experiences that not only stem from you being a lawyer, but all the other things that you've kind of incorporated to run. I really like this this new JP court that we have as soon as you take the bench. Let's talk about that real quickly in the next couple of minutes that we have. We're in the middle of an election. Early voting just started. Tell us a little bit about that and when and what. This is, of course, here in Dallas County, Democratic and Republican primaries.
Yes. So
you were actually up against some Democrats to run against the Republican. Tell us the time lines and what that kind of looks like.
So yes, the Democratic and Republican primaries are going on currently. Early voting started February 20th and it ends on March 2nd, and it's every day. Some people think it's not going to be on the weekends, but it is. So currently, today is the last day that early voting will be from 8 to 5. Starting tomorrow on Saturday, it'll be 7 to 7. And for early voting, you can vote at any location in Dallas County. You do not have to go by your specific precinct. Right. So if you happen to be across side of town from your house and you see an early voting location, you can still pop in and vote. And I think there's about a list of about 20 early voting locations, and you can find them on DallasCountyVotes.org for all the locations. On Sunday, locations will be open from 1 to 6, and then all of next week, Monday through Friday, will be open 7 to 7. And then Election Day is March 6th. Polls will be open from 7 to 7 as well, but you will have to vote in your specific precinct. And so if you don't know what that precinct is, you can, again, go to DallasCountyVotes.org. You can get a sample ballot, which is also a great tool because there's so many races.
It's pretty lengthy. I think it's 7-pager.
Yes, it's very lengthy, and I really encourage your listeners to make sure you go to the end of the ballot. That's where our races are at, because people think over it at page 3. Well, there's still lots of people you'll be voting on this ballot. You're talking about who your congressional member will be, your state representatives, judicial races from, you're talking about even Supreme Court, Court of Appeals here in Texas, all the way down to JP, and there's also propositions.
Yeah. And Dallas County, for you Dallas County voters, really important. The primaries for a lot of folks means who's gonna basically win. So make sure you get out there and vote. Incredibly important. Don't wait till March 6th if you can avoid it. But if you can, I actually say that, but I love voting on election day.
I'm waiting.
And I go out on the 6th, but you just never know what could happen on that day, and you may miss your vote. So don't do that. As Sasha just mentioned, you have the ability starting when does it start? 7 to 7.
7 to 7 will start tomorrow, and then Sunday will only be 1 to 6, and then back to 7 to 7 all of next week.
Okay, so don't forget to do that. Let's get out there and vote, and let's do what we can to bring on the right people to the bench and to our other elected offices. Sasha, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck. Do you have a website, anything people can kind of get some additional information from you on?
Yes, no, definitely. And so if you want more information about our campaign or, again, my experience, you can go to www.sasha4jp.com. 4 is spelled out, so forjp.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's all Sasha4jp. And, for anyone who's thinking about, we talk a lot about if you're thinking about running for office, volunteering for a campaign is a great way to get that experience. And so right now we need help with people greeting voters at each of the locations in our precinct. So if you want to come down, you can contact us. My cell phone and my email is on the website, and say, hey, I want to volunteer tomorrow. I would love to have you. Or if, again, you want to donate, if you feel like that's the best way you want to contribute, we would take that too, and you can donate on our website.
Sasha, thank you so much for coming on earlier. And people probably didn't hear this. It's been raining all week, and I know you've been out there going and knocking door to door, and we just appreciate the efforts that you're making to truly just represent our county. So thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Come back with our next guest, Chris Hamilton. But once again, thank you so much, Sasha Moreno, who is running for
Dallas County Justice of the Peace, Precinct 4, Place 2. And thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful weekend, and best of luck.
You too. Stay dry.